the Executive Insights Podcast, brought to you by AWS. I'm Clark Rogers, Director of Enterprise Strategy. Today's guest is Jacob DePriest from 1Password. Our discussion covers combating shadow AI, the evolution of identity and access management, and Jacob's transition from the public sector to the private sector. Please enjoy. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Would love to hear more about your role at 1Password and your responsibilities there.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Security and CISO at 1Password. And so I'm responsible for the security team, our privacy team, and we're in a really unique position as well, where we've got a lot of responsibility for how the cryptography and the security of the development side works as well.
Love it. You've come to 1Password with quite a varied background, NSA to GitHub, to 1Password. Can you share a little bit about how those varied organizations have sort of shaped you into a security leader?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out in engineering actually at NSA. And so I did kind of digital signal processing and real-time processing engineering for a really long time. And so kind of coming up through the agency that way and getting all the training as a manager and as a leader, and then eventually moving over to security was really, I think, transformative for me. And so then kind of moving to GitHub and being able to serve developers around the world, and now at 1Password, being able to secure these credentials. I think it's really fun because I've got a very nuanced perspective on how to engage other teams, how to think about partnerships across the business. And so one of the things that I've kind of come to hold as a core approach to how I think about security is the only way to really scale security outcomes is through engineering partnerships. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just really important. And my background, I think, helps create some empathy for the engineering teams, where often our controls can be seen as friction. And so how can we do that in a more productive way that's partnership oriented?
And it helps to speak that language as well.
It does.
So that transition from engineering to security, what sparked that? Was there something about security that said, hey, I want to go do that? Or was it you need to go work in security from your management?
I've always kind of followed the river upstream a little bit, I guess. And so starting out in engineering, it was trying to understand we've got all these things to do. How can we make it easier for our teams and the developers? And so I started working on developer tools and code generation tools and things long before AI agents were around. And then there was this transition point, particularly right as the pandemic was hitting, of how can we help people work from home? And how are we going to deal with remote work at an agency that for 60 plus years had really only lived inside SCIFs?
Right.
And so that's really the big jumping off point. And security was baked into every one of those stages.
Sure.
But that last kind of opportunity to really build and run what ended up being the foundations for the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at NSA was when I kind of fell in love with the security side of things, because it was so rewarding to build and launch what we were doing for the agency at scale and doing it kind of live on the internet. Mm-hmm. To support a newly remote workforce was pretty incredible and a lot of fun. And I was like, I got to keep doing this. This is great.
That's fantastic. So there was one transition from sort of the engineering to the security focused role.
Yep.
But I would argue the larger transition is moving from the public sector to the private sector. Can you share a little bit about that? Were there any sort of bumps in the road as you sort of learned to operate as a civilian?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that is coming up a lot as I talk to friends who are interested in moving out of the U.S. government life and potentially into the private sector as well. And I think it comes down to, two areas. One is something that I was fortunate enough to always have curiosity about how private sector was working. I was always going to conferences and reading books and trying to understand, how could I run teams inside the government similar to how innovative teams were running in the private sector. And so I think that's one, the curiosity and the understanding has to be there. And I think the second is challenging for everybody. It's how do you translate your skills and the approaches and the things you learn in the government to the private sector world? It's a new language in some ways. The titles don't translate, but a lot does. Leading people is the same, right? Dealing with challenges is the same. Displaying grit in the face of adversity, it's the same. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of building confidence on how to translate those skills into really any environment that I think is it's both necessary and hard.
How do you lead your teams today? And it's sort of a two-part question. So you have your security organization that you lead sort of day to day, But then how do you lead the larger organization, non-security, from a security culture perspective to make sure that they understand that security is the top priority at 1Password?
It's all about, for me, how to put first and foremost enabling the business, right? Security is an enabler. I really believe that. And we do have an obligation to the company and our customers to execute world-class security. At the same time, if the company's not progressing and we're not serving those customers, then we don't have anything to secure. And so when I'm thinking about leading internal security and privacy at 1Password, those are the conversations we have a lot. How do we balance the risk? What's the right thing for the business? What's the right thing for our customers? And there's no formula to follow necessarily. It comes down to experience and surrounding yourself with smart people who know more than you, and then bringing your collective experience together to make those decisions. When I think about the company as a whole, I'm really fortunate because 1Password's security ethos is built in. And I get to have conversations with folks all across the company every day who really care about privacy and security in a way that I think is somewhat unique for a lot of companies, where I'll get folks from the field team or from a product reach out and be like, hey, I'm kind of worried about the security of this or the privacy of this. Should we have your team look at it? Or what do you think about this? Or, hey, I kind of want to start using these AI tools. Is that okay? Do we have a policy? And like, I get the reach outs. I don't have to push it as much. Now, at the same time, there is an element of education and trying to engage the rest of the company. And so we do things like AMAs and newsletters and really trying to be out with the company as we're evolving this together, but it's really a partnership.
Are there certain non-negotiables at 1Password that are your sort of security backstop that are must-haves throughout the organization versus areas where you're a little bit more flexible to really spur innovation?
Yeah, I think because privacy is such a compelling part of our story, both internally to the company and in the market, customers trust us because they trust us with their data. And so privacy at 1Password is, I would say, more forefront in most people's minds than at other companies, which I love and is really important. And so when we're doing a new product feature, or we're thinking about adjusting how we're going to wire two products together, those things are really non-negotiable. Like, we talk a lot about it. We have our teams look at it and we make sure that it's done right up front. And then I think there's the normal security fundamentals. Like, we need strong MFA, particularly on high-risk applications and infrastructure and things like that. And those, I think, are more common at really everywhere that's doing kind of innovative development.
So strong authentication, patch your systems, those types of things.
Exactly right.
Love it. So at 1Password, you're focused on protecting some of the most crucial aspects of either individual's life or a corporation's life, and those are the passwords themselves. So confidential computing comes into play here. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you think about confidential computing, and then how 1Password is leveraging it?
So one of the things we've been thinking about a lot and working on the last 6 months to a year is, how can we scale some of the things we're doing? Users are asking us to do more and more on their behalf. We're already trusted with a lot of these credentials, but at the end of the day, we want to continue to engage that trust and earn that trust every step of the way. And to do that, we're leaning into things like using AWS Nitro Enclaves and being able to create compute spaces and processing spaces where it's really trusted and separate, and having an assurance that while the processing's happening there, it's happening in a very safe way. It's happening without our employees' eyes on it, and companies can trust that. And so we're working through the process of building this confidential compute capability to do lots of things, but we really want to enable the scale that our customers want in a way that they can look at very transparently our architecture and say, actually, no, we're totally good with that. We trust how that's built, and we're okay with 1Password being able to do that processing on our behalf.
Love it. So I don't need to tell you the explosion of AI tools over the last couple of years. How do you think about sort of your minimum security standards within 1Password so you can allow your business customers to take advantage of some of these AI tools, but you're also protecting the company as well?
It's happening so fast. I think being able to contain it, if that's the goal, is almost a losing battle for any CISO, for any security team. And so I think leaning into just knowing that teams are going to use it, individuals are going to use it, And then there's I think an aspect of training, of guidance of, hey, if you're going to use this and if you're going to use it on your personal device, you're going to use a personal account, please don't put company information in. Please don't put sensitive information in. But on the other side, we're really trying to lean into it. We want to encourage the business to adopt AI where it makes sense. And we want to do it in a way that is really productive for the company. We don't want to be a hindrance to that. And so, we're actually using quite a few AI-enabled tools or AI chatbots across the company. I think it's really interesting. And so the key now is how do we do that in a responsible way? Mm-hmm. And how do we make sure that the ones that aren't approved are getting flagged and we're either doing the training and doing the approvals, or in some cases we're going to block them and make sure that, that's not an approved one, or we shouldn't go use that one. But then also providing approved tools that people can do, because people want to use it. They want it to help them write their emails, write that paper, summarize these documents. Like it's effective at some of these things, and providing clear guidance on how folks can do that to accelerate their jobs, I think is really important as well. And then normalizing it and talking about it and saying, hey, this is how I use it. This is how this document was, guided or augmented by these tools, I think is really important as well.
Most people want to do the right thing, right? And you just have to be able to fill in that blank for them and say, here's how to do that right.
That's exactly right. 99% of the time when in security, when we see something kind of go wrong in one of these spaces, or somebody doing something against policy, it's not because they wanted to. They just didn't know, or they didn't know what the right way to do it was. So 100% agree.
Any additional thoughts on Agentic AI, model context protocol, the sort of A2A protocols, things like that? Where do you sort of see that going?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think there's a lot of potential there. I also think we haven't quite as an industry figured out the identity and authentication models for all these quite yet. And so I think we have an opportunity to be really kind of part of this conversation in the industry. How do we do this safely? How can we enable the agentic workflows and the automation that we want to, but do so in a way where companies and individuals understand what permissions they're giving, for what context they're giving them, how long those permissions are allowed, what are the things that they can and can't do, how do we put guardrails in place? And so I think we're just at the early stages of that, but I think it's an incredibly important conversation if we're going to adopt this the way I think we're going to.
And there's a whole new paradigm with this sort of non-human actors, right? Because we've had service accounts and human accounts, and now we have these non-human actors who are acting like a human, but they're not, and who gave them their permissions, et cetera.
Exactly. And I think it's going to change how we think about incident response and detection engineering as well, because, where impossible travel might be a thing for me as a human, if I've granted an agent access to certain parts of my credentials or identity to go book travel on my behalf, who knows where that's running? And how does the incident response team understand how to think about threats in that space? And when do we escalate? When do we not? And so I think there's a lot of change that's coming soon in this space.
Yeah, I do believe that the identity and access management portion of all this is going to be key to success. And I know 1Password has recently released the extended access management product. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and how customers should be thinking about it?
So our thesis around this is that there's an access trust gap, which is basically the difference between users, apps, and devices, and kind of what we think they should have access to and how we think we're controlling it. And then in most companies, the reality is slightly different, right? And, often we try and put as many things as we can behind SSO, but users and employees are still going off and doing other things, right? Not everything's behind SSO. They're using their personal accounts for a chatbot, for AI. There's all sorts of other things happening there. And so our goal here is to secure every login from every app, from every device.
Okay.
And we already have a lot of the credential space with 1Password and passkeys, and that's working really well. Then the device trust angle is kind of step 2 of understanding what's the state of the device, what's the health of it? Is this the device I think it is? Like, is it in a healthy state that I'm okay with it doing the activity that it's requesting?
Right.
And then most recently, we've added access governance. And that's bringing in things like entitlements, onboarding and offboarding workflows, and being able to grant access to these applications. And so we believe these together are going to create a really powerful combination that's going to enable us to achieve that vision.
And I imagine there's an aspect of reporting up and out from this offering as well, right? Because it's the chief legal officer, chief risk officer needs to have that visibility.
Absolutely. One of the capabilities in there is sort of the shadow IT spend management aspect, which is fantastic. But, at the other side of it is things like access reviews and being able to like show your work to an auditor, which is really important. And so being able to have that in one place, I think is going to be a game changer for us.
At 1Password, you're not only the CISO, but you are a business leader within the organization. So how do you go about reporting security successes, challenges, opportunities, et cetera, in the language of business to the rest of the organization?
Before, as an engineer, kind of growing up on that side of the business, I tended to approach things very, very technically or very matter of fact of like, we've got to solve X, Y, and Z. We've got this technical debt, this set of security vulnerabilities, and we need this much money to go solve those. And in reality, when you bring the business context in, most of those conversations are more nuanced. Communicating, this is something I believe that we must go do, and here's the business reasons why. And then here's some other areas where I believe we should go do it, but maybe the timeline's negotiable, or the investment's negotiable, or how we get there is negotiable. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is incorporate that into my communications, how I report up, how I talk about it to the company of how we make those decisions and why we're rolling out certain capabilities to the business, or we are partnering with this vendor to solve this cloud security posture risk or whatever it is. Here's why. And here's the things that it's doing to protect our customers. And I think bringing in that business context is really important, not just for the leadership, but also for others in the company to see why is the security team doing what they're doing.
That's fantastic. Shifting gears a little bit back to our earlier conversation around sort of shadow AI, right? And shadow IT has been around for a long time. Shadow AI is probably going to continue on. What advice would you give to your fellow CISOs on how to address that within their organizations?
I think the key thing is trying to identify what are the non-negotiable risks from some of the shadow AI capabilities that are out there on the market. Just trying to stop it all. I think given that there's a new app, a new feature, a new something almost every week now on the market, and most people are using their own devices in some context, or they're using their own logins on a work device, I think it's really difficult to say you're going to stop it all. But I think really it's taking a step back and saying, given our privacy principles at company X, Y, or Z, given the security promises we've made to our customers, where are the things we can't negotiate? Is it the country that the AI is operating in? Is it the privacy policy of the AI solution? And which are the ones we're going to be like, okay, it's probably okay, but we need to do training. So tell our workforce, please don't put sensitive information in this. And when is it when we actually need to take the step to block it? Because actually we think the risk is too high. And so I think thinking through that in a more nuanced way is going to be really important because it's just moving so fast. I don't know that any of us could say we're going to be 100% keeping up, locking it all down every day.
How do you sort of mentor those who are coming up, right? Those who want to be a CISO or maybe don't want to be a CISO, but are looking for a career in security. What kind of advice are you giving them and mentorship?
One of the sayings that I kind of come back to that's served me well through my career is there is no they. There's no group. They're not going to come in and fix this. They're not going to come in and help me solve this. They're not going to show up with 10 more people to solve whatever technical problem is in front of me. And sometimes there is a they, and it's wonderful. But I think approaching a job in a company or an agency and going into it and saying, I'm not going to assume that everybody else is going to solve parts of this problem, but like, how can I contribute? I work for the company.
So ownership.
It's ownership. Right? Yeah. It's ownership. And saying like, if I see a part of the problem that nobody really owns, am I going to complain that nobody owns it and try and find an owner, or am I just going to go do it? Right. And often I think the people who can lean into that and just not get wrapped up on pointing fingers and trying to figure out who owns what, like we just kind of roll up our sleeves and dig in together. Those tend to be the people I think that learn the new skills quickly because they've just jumped into a new area and they had to learn it.
Right.
And when the more you learn, I think the more effective you can be at a broader set of jobs. And so those tend to be the encouragements I give and the mentorship and coaching is like, hey, just go lean into that. Just go do that. Like if there's nobody there, go figure it out.
Tell me more about the importance of curiosity as a security professional.
I think right now more than ever, it's critical. I think security teams right now who are not curious about AI, who are not curious about how fast technology is moving or how it's affecting life right now, I think are not going to be at the forefront of protecting their company and their organizations against the threats that are coming. And so I think that's just one example. But I think curiosity also helps to avoid being the department of no.
For sure.
When somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to do this thing, instead of us as security practitioners saying like, oh, that's really risky, we should not do that. Instead saying, tell me more about what you're trying to achieve.
Love
this one thing that you proposed maybe is not going to work for whatever reason, but what are you trying to achieve? How can I help you get to the outcome you want? I think is just a really important way to approach engagements across the company.
How do you sort of encourage that continuous development with your directs and sort of the broader teams that you're responsible for?
It's a question that we talk about a lot. And how do we, particularly with the AI tools that are happening now, how do we encourage usage in a safe way? How do we think about that? And so one of the things I'm doing is I'm just starting to really lean into being more transparent about when I've used one of the tools to help me do something. Like, hey, I wrote this paper, and oh, by the way, I did it collaboratively with this chatbot.
Right.
And here's what it gave me and here's what it didn't. Or telling stories where it doesn't work. Hey, I asked this question and there was a full-blown hallucination, and I'm really glad that we checked it because it was totally wrong.
Right.
And I think just being transparent with the team and normalizing that I'm learning and some of that is making mistakes. And it just sort of breeds an environment, hopefully, where folks are encouraged to do the same.
In 18 to 24 months, I'm going to ask you to sort of bring out your crystal ball. Where do you think we're going to be from both a technology and a security perspective?
On the security side, I think we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years, the same challenges continue to present themselves, right? Identity, strong multi-factor authentication, phishing,
patching, or lack thereof, right?
Right. Yeah. Awareness of the security landscape in an organization and then more broadly. And so I think that's going to continue. I think on the technology front, AI is going to both make that more interesting and hopefully make it easier for our teams to go tackle those problems. But it's also going to empower threat actors too. And so, we're seeing threat actors using AI to go faster with phishing campaigns.
Right.
And so it's something we're going to have to keep up with and we're going to have to evolve with as well. And so in particular, I think the Agentic AI is going to be quite interesting. I think that's a space where I'm watching closely. We're involved in from a company perspective, but I'm both really optimistic and also cautious that we've got to get it right, because the downsides could be pretty high if we start to unleash agents with all of our credentials and identities without guardrails around it. And so this is why I'm excited to be at 1Password right now, to be part of that conversation and hopefully do this in a safer way.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts for your fellow CISOs, security practitioners out there?
If you haven't taken the time to dig into some of the topics we've been talking about today, Agentic AI, how to use it in your organizations, now's the time. It's not going to slow down. It's just going to get faster. And I think the other thing too is surrounding yourself with peers and colleagues where you can have these conversations and push back on each other and learn from each other. And I think is critical. It's impossible for any one person to kind of build all the context necessary. And so that team, whether it's official or unofficial, I think is going to be more important than ever.
Sound advice. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. This was great.